Thank you so much for joining us today. I know this is a very busy time of year, so I appreciate you all making time out of your schedules to be with us. Um, I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion today, even though the topic is quite specific. I think all of us here are interested in it, so I'm hoping that we'll be able to cover some good points around this topic for organic alternatives to conventional celery powder. I am Dr. Amber Siligo, the Senior Director of the Organic Center. I'll be moderating today's discussion. We also have Dr. Elias Miller, who's our Science Programs Manager. He's going to be sort of hanging out in the background, helping us do some of the logistics like keeping time and taking some notes and such. Um, some of you I recognize and others I don't. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Organic Center, I'm just going to briefly share with you that we are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. We have a mission to conduct and convene credible, evidence-based science on environmental and health effects of organic food and farming, and to communicate those findings, those research findings to the general public. One of the ways that we achieve our mission is to partner with academic research teams like who we have here today and help them facilitate their work and or share their research results to various audiences that tend to fall outside of their typical networks. Today's meeting is going to serve that communication function for this particular project, but we're doing it a little differently than we tend to do. Often we will have a big public webinar that follows the end of a big research project, but because this topic is so niche and has probably the most implications specifically for industry, and because it has a very unique history of industry working with OTA on this topic, we've decided to just pull in those who have historically worked on this topic and some people who have joined this scene recently who we think might be interested in learning about these research results today. So, we're hoping to share some of the results from this work, but really have a good, robust discussion with everybody on this call to talk about the implications of these research results. Specifically, we're hoping to learn a bit more about where you all think this kind of work should go or does not need to go to better support your businesses. So I'm going to share a little bit about how the next 90 minutes will go. Just let me share my screen here. This. Okay, can you all see my slide there? Okay, so we're going to start with Scott Rice, who's the Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs at the Organic Trade Association. He's going to share some historical policy context about when and why this conversation around celery powder was started and how that set this precedence for research to find an organic alternative. Then we'll hand it over to Dr. Erin Silva, who's professor in plant pathology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She's going to share more about the journey of developing a research program and finding funding for this work, which was not a short or simple process, and getting the work started. She'll also share some overall research objectives and some results from field trials in Wisconsin. Then Dr. Xin Zhao, a professor in horticulture at the University of Florida, will share results from field trials there in partnership with PhD candidate Zachary Ray, who tomorrow will officially receive his PhD, and we can start calling him doctor. So that's exciting. But Zach is going to join in sharing some of those Florida results. And then last but not least, we have Dr. Stephen Shen, who is a postdoctoral researcher also at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And he's going to share some of his research results on the quality of organic meat curing ingredients on meat processing. So the results presentations should bring us to about 2 o'clock, which will leave us a solid 30 minutes to discuss some of the implications of this work. I'd like to discuss it from the perspective of the research, but then also from the rest of you here as industry representatives. I do have a list of questions that I can use to guide the discussion. But if you have any specific questions or comments that you would like addressed, during that time period, go ahead and pop them into the chat at any point. And also just know that we have this intentionally set up as a meeting format so that we can all talk together. So if you want a chance to speak, you will have that. Um, okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Scott to kick us off. Thanks, Scott.
Great. Thanks, Amber. Welcome, everybody, and appreciate the opportunity to give a little bit of a background on the celery powder history from a kind of regulatory perspective. I think some of this might be familiar to you all, but good for just kind of setting the context and how this got to be a topic of conversation. So, generally, USDA organic regulations require that any agricultural ingredient included in an organic product must be organic. However, there are limited exceptions that exist that allow the use of non-organically produced agricultural products when the organic form is not commercially available. Celery powder is one such product, and in 2007, it was petitioned to the National Organic Standards Board for inclusion on the national list of allowed and prohibited substances. And it was allowed as a non-organically produced alternative. At the time it was petitioned, industry didn't see a lot of great difficulty in the potential for developing an organic version. We'll hear from our panelists in a few minutes how that's perhaps was perhaps a bit optimistic given all the research involved and what we've seen over the years. So every 5 years, products on the national list undergo what is referred to as the sunset review. And that's when NOSB evaluates whether that substance should remain on the list against evaluating that against the nationalist criteria and looking at any updated data out there. And during its 2017 sunset review of celery powder, the NOSB proposed to remove the allowance, noting that doing so would push the organic sector to develop an organic alternative. We've seen this kind of tactic or interest from the board in the past on other items that are in the same place on the list of uh, using it kind of as a carrot and a stick, I suppose, to try and get the industry moving on finding an alternative. So, as development takes significant effort and time, the organic industry requested an extension to research organic alternatives that meet the functional requirements as a meat curing agent. Uh, and the intent of NOSB was to sunset celery powder in 2022, at which time only organic forms would be allowed in organic meat products and removing that commercial availability clause or option. Prior to the board indicating their desire in removal, it was in the fall of 2015 that OTA collaborated with the Organic Center to convene a national list innovation working group. And that group brought together OTA members interested in investing in applied research to identify alternatives to those materials currently on the national list, including things like the celery powder, kind of organic, natural, or more compatible synthetics. And the first project that was chosen was to find an organic alternative to that conventional celery powder. So the working group set out to identify potential crop varietals able to meet specifications needed for curing while being easily incorporated into current crop rotation systems and other issues that we'll hear about here. To support the work, the group has spearheaded an effort to secure an OREI grant, which was subsequently awarded to the University of Wisconsin Organic Center and OTA as collaborators in that. So while helping to support research and survey industry on needs is a significant part of our role here at OTA, we've also invested a fair bit of time in educating the members of the NOSB and organic stakeholders around these challenges in developing an organic alternative. You know, when folks see a pile of organic celery in the market, it's initially difficult for them to understand why you can't just juice that and stop using that conventional stuff. And remember, board members are on a 5-year term. So they'll only see a material once, and that means we've got to educate a new board every time a material is up for review again, as well as folks in the organic community as well. So we illustrate the complexities of coming up with an alternative when we do that, ensuring that a replacement has the right flavor profile, it's consistently available from reliable and accessible sources, that it meets food safety requirements, and other variables that make it a little tougher than just running that pile of celery through a Vitamix. In the run-up to the board's 2019 Sunset Review, OTA highlighted that continuing work to develop organic alternatives and cited that $2 million OREI grant. And we noted that prohibiting celery powder at that time without a commercially available alternative would halt the production of organic processed meat products. It would cause products to disappear off shelves, and it would significantly limit markets for organic livestock producers as well. And the board heard that. They voted to keep celery powder on the list at that time. And while much work was accomplished in the interim between that 2019 review and the most recent review last year, OTA still stressed there was a fair bit of work still to be done, even though we could count some successes. We needed some more work done before we could feel confident in removing celery powder. So the board, again, aligned with that view. But this time, we did see two members voted to remove celery powder and one abstained from the vote. So still working on that education and assuring of the research that's ongoing here. So we've got another 4.5 years on the clock to continue this work. And I'm excited to hear latest findings from all of you, as well as how OTA can continue to support this effort moving forward. And with that, I think we're handing it over to Erin to start hearing about that research.
Thank you, Scott. And it's great to be here with you all. It's always fun to be able to share the results of our research, especially with those that are using using the research that we're conducting. So I'm going to jump into my slides. Some of the initial slides Scott's covered. But again, I'm Erin Silva. I've been working in the organic sector for, gosh, over 20 years now. I'm in the Department of Plant Pathology, University of Wisconsin-Madison, but I am really more of an agronomist and horticulturist by training, and had the opportunity to lead this effort. So I will go through these super quick in the interest of time. I think everyone here knows that the organic demand continues to grow, not only in the US, but nationally. We see this trend continue, even with some of the economic ups and downs that we're experiencing as a nation. And we know that organic meat processors face regulatory pressure. Certified organic meat products must be cured with vegetable curing powders. And as Scott mentioned, there's a need to find viable solutions for the American processors of organic cured meats. And here's just one example, and how cultured celery juice and cultured vegetable powders are a key ingredient in creating a high quality product. So why has the exception persisted? For when this project first started, there were no organic alternatives in the market. This has changed in recent years since this project started. So this has been an interesting development. Diana Foods did launch the first, my understanding, the first organic cultured celery powder for organic meat curing in the US. So we do have options available. However, and we can discuss more about this as a group, having one source and one option still creates risk for the industry and certainly supply chain challenges. And with this time that we're experiencing with tariffs and trade issues, I would argue that having one source probably isn't the best position for the organic cured meat industry to be in. So this is a model. The Organic Center developed this wonderful model to outline how we were able to accomplish this work. So identifying the situation, forming that working group, developing the concept, securing the funding, which is always key, and to be honest, is even more challenging now. It's always been challenging, but even more challenging with this political environment and the fact that right now we have no organic federal funding available to us, unfortunately. But with this funding, we're able to conduct, I think, very impactful research through conducting trials, assessing our data, being able to work with industry partners to test and verify our results. And this is the next key step. There certainly is still some research that we need to do to further understand the viability of producing this product in the U.S. But this next step of commercialization, scaling, and launching, I think this is the next bottleneck that the industry is going to have to address. And as was mentioned in the slide, this is not a short process. This is going to take, it's already taken about 10 years, and we're still not at the end. We're projecting it's going to be at least 13 years, if not more, for this to come to an end where we have more options available to us. Um, so, uh, um, we're able to the partnership with Organic Trade Association, the partnership with Organic Center, and the partnership with industry was absolutely essential for us to be successful in obtaining this funding. Not only did industry provide some initial funds to be able to collect some preliminary data, which is absolutely essential for us to get federal funds, but their input and their involvement was absolutely critical for our success in obtaining those federal funds. So very, very grateful for Organic Trade Association, Organic Center, and OTA's members to enable this work essentially and make this work happen. So the OREI grant, this is a federal grant, the Organic Research and Extension Initiative. Again, unfortunately, with everything that's going on in the federal government, these funds are no longer available to organic researchers. This is a huge problem in terms of being able to forward innovation within the organic sector and allow us to do work like this. But fortunately, we were able to get this funding 5 years ago and develop this collaboration between the UW-Madison Departments of Plant Pathology, Ag and Applied Econ, and Animal and Dairy Sciences, the University of Florida, as well as the Organic Center. And a big part of this as well is our involvement of grad students. And I think from an industry perspective, our ability to train the next generation of organic leaders, scientists, and people that you're going to hire is also a real benefit of this project and this funding. So I'm going to talk briefly about objective one. There were several objectives. Objectives involving field trials. Can we grow organic celery in a way that we can have elevated nitrate levels without losing the core organic values of not having negative environmental consequences? So that's what my program was more involved in. Dr. Shing is going to be talking about more of the food quality side of things. Can organic powders allow us to create a high quality product, both in terms of aesthetics and quality from the consumer perspective, as well as food safety? And for the field project as well, University of Florida conducted trials, so we were able to collect that data in terms of the feasibility of growing the product over multiple regions that have some key partners in terms of being able to get this to commercialization and have the organic farmers available to be able to grow the product. We did some initial economic evaluation, which I won't really talk about. That was a bit of a challenge given the fact that this sector is quite small. There's a lot of proprietary information in terms of volumes and prices. So we could talk a little bit about that in the discussion, but I'm not highlighting that here. And then working on more of this outreach component as well. So diving into the field management perspective. So as I mentioned, some initial investment through industry funding, Organic Valley, I'll have to call out as a really stepping up to the table and providing funding, allowed us to collect some preliminary results. It's hard to believe that was a decade ago. One of the questions that we wanted to answer was, are there specific varieties of celery that are going to be more adapted to accumulating nitrate stably and be more adapted to this particular system? This is not a table celery that you see in the grocery store. And I think that's one of the misconceptions in terms of people seeing organic celery and thinking, why can't we have a processed product? This is a specific product for a specific use that we're actually looking for some of the opposite of what a table celery is. Typically, high nitrates are not something that we want to see in a consumed product, but as a processed product, we're looking for a variety that is going to accumulate nitrates from the soil and hold it onto the tissue and hold it in a way that is going to be stable through different harvesting windows. So what we found in these preliminary results, calling out another incredible industry partner in this project, Carry Foods, that did some in-kind work for us to help us get some of this initial data. We did find the variety Tall Utah, which is an older variety, did seem to have more elevated levels of nitrate. So the threshold that we're trying to reach, from my understanding, is about 1,200 parts per million of nitrate. So we did see from the initial evaluation as well that indeed, using organic methods and organic fertility, we were able to produce celery that was high enough to be able to accomplish the processing side of things. And we also found some varieties that may be more adapted to these systems. We also looked at timing, trying to understand from early harvest versus later harvest. When is that ideal window to harvest for the nitrate concentrations? And we did see some differences here as well. In terms of that, just optimization. We also found, which is a supply chain challenge in terms of getting this to commercialization, that if we had a processing delay, which is true for some of the other crops that we evaluated as well, which I'll highlight in a bit, it's going to be important in terms of being able to take that product from the field and be able to bring it to the facility that is going to process it. So when we look at some of the bottlenecks still in terms of getting US production, identifying farms that can grow the crop and identifying facilities to be able to process that crop and have those closely connected is going to be something that we need to think about. So we looked at different levels of fertilizer, organically allowed fertilizers that were going to get us to that target nitrate level of about 1,200 parts per million. So this is a photo of my grad student, Owen Washam. He's now moved on to a different position in extension, so bring some organic capacity into extension in the southeast part of the country. One of the concerns that the NOSB had was that we don't want to over fertilize. Our understanding of how, from the conventional sector, they were able to get high nitrate celery was that they were over fertilizing. That is a big environmental risk. Over fertilizing nitrogen fertilizer can cause groundwater contamination. That is not something we want to see as an organic community and not something the organic consumers want to see. So we wanted to try to reach that balance of what is the minimum level of nitrogen that we can put on the crop to be able to get the target levels of nitrate. And that will help minimize negative environmental consequences. Also keep money in the farmers' pockets, to be quite honest, because not having to fertilize as much is going to help keep down costs of production. So in Owen's work, we were able to find that indeed lower levels of nitrogen fertilization, we had lower levels of nitrate in the tissue, but we were able to find some levels of around 200 kilograms per hectare, 300 kilograms per hectare that we were able to quite honestly exceed the target nitrate levels that were needed for a high quality processing crop. And we were able to look at that again over different DAP is days after planting. So we were able to track that throughout the season and see how those levels fluctuated throughout the season. They were pretty stable over the 2 years of the study, but again, indeed, those nitrate concentrations did increase with nitrogen application rates. So it was around 300 parts per million that we found, or 300 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen that we were able to produce that stable amount of 1,200 parts per million. So we were able to kind of get some recommendations. Anywhere higher than that, though, we were finding that we weren't getting extra accumulation, which is a good information for organic farmers to again be able to target what is going to be the best amount of nitrogen without over applying, overspending money, and not causing environmental consequences. So we're trying to figure out how much that nitrogen also impacted celery growth because it's not only the concentration of nitrate per gram of tissue, it's how much tissue you're producing. More tissue you're producing, more nitrate that's going to be coming off the field. And that's essentially what you're harvesting here is the nitrate. So we were able to find that they're fertilizing more not only was not necessarily increasing the nitrate levels, but it was not necessarily increasing the amount of celery you were harvesting off the field as well. So trying to get that optimization as part of our work here. The other crop we tested was Swiss chard. So one of the challenges with organic celery is that organic vegetable land is really high value land. And processing crops, like canned green beans or frozen organic vegetables, they tend not to be high value crops. So it's going to be a hard sell for organic vegetable farmers to produce a processing crop where they're not necessarily going to get the economic returns. Swiss chard, though, Swiss chard is something that we can harvest in a shorter window. Organic celery takes the whole season to produce, so the field is held up in the whole growing season to get that celery to maturity. But Swiss chard is pretty quick. So one of the options with Swiss chard is that we could grow it within an organic grain rotation. That's a very different economic situation, and it opens up a whole new pool of farmers. So we were looking at nitrate concentrations in Swiss chard. We were finding that that overall was lower than celery, but still hitting that 1200 ppm mark. So Swiss chard could be a potential alternative for nitrate production. And we were also doing that again by fertilizer level and seeing similarly lower fertilizer levels. We weren't seeing as much nitrate accumulation in the tissue, but getting around 200 pounds of nitrogen available, we were hitting those target rates. So something to further research in terms of the R&D is Swiss chard as a potential alternative, which are currently on the market as a vegetable curing powder. And that's all I have. I think I saw the time was just up, so hopefully I hit that mark pretty closely.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Erin. We did start a few minutes late, so right on time. Okay, so let's pop over now to Sheen and Zach. And just as a reminder, if you all have questions, feel free to put them in the chat now and we'll discuss them at the end.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Aaron, for leading this project. And in Florida, our multi-year research focused primarily on examining the impact of varietal factors as well as several other cultural and management, nutrient management aspects in terms of their impact on organic celery production and plant nitrogen and nitrate dynamics. So I'm going to let Zach share the key findings from his dissertation research. And Zach, please take away.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. So as Dr. Zhao mentioned, this was also a very field trial driven kind of integrated approach to understanding plant and soil nitrogen dynamics in celery, as well as trying to understand a little bit more about broader organic systems in terms of the impacts on different nutrient management practices, cultivar evaluations, nitrogen application rates using different and contrasting sources of granular and liquid organic fertilizers, as well as examining different application programming for different nitrogen sources, so including different rates as well as different nitrogen application timing, comparing in-season to pre-plant organic fertilization, and then also exploring integrated nutrient management approaches using cover crops and composts to try to gain an understanding of how these integrated practices may have impacts on nutrient management and nitrate dynamics, specifically in celery. So the first project that I want to highlight here is the cultivar evaluation studies. And these studies were conducted in the spring and fall of 2021, and you can see the timeline associated with these two experiments here. And in the spring, we evaluated 8 different cultivars, and then in the fall, we expanded that to include 10 cultivars. And we also examined crop yield performance and nitrate dynamics throughout the production season, as well as at different times throughout the day. But for the sake of time here, I'm primarily going to be focusing on the cultivar level differences between these two in these two spring and fall trials. So in the spring, we saw, or actually in the spring and the fall, we saw some very distinct cultivar differences in terms of yield performance. And in the spring, we saw the final yields were significantly higher in Pink Plume and in Tall Utah, as compared to some of the lower yielding cultivars like Conquistador and Tango. And you can see some photos here of what Pink Plume and Tall Utah look like in terms of overall growth habit, morphological differences. Pink Plume tends to be thinner celery stalks and more leafy. So kind of curious to hear some insight from the industry too in terms of how the morphology of different celery cultivars may impact the utility of that cultivar as a curing agent. But these two cultivars, Pink Plume and Tall Utah, were also the most robust at the late season yield development in the final 2 weeks of production. And this was critical to consider with the environmental conditions, the warmer weather, the more frequent precipitation that we saw in the spring trial, which actually extended into early June in our case. Um, so it's important to consider that late season yield development as part of understanding the differences in cultivar performance. In the fall, we saw cultivars like Command, Marengo, and TZ6200 emerge as higher yielding cultivars, just going to show the cultivar by environment interaction that we see, where cultivars performing well in the spring did not necessarily perform well in the fall, although Tall Utah was a consistent high performing cultivar that we noticed in both spring and fall conditions. So in terms of nitrate content, we saw early season differences in the spring in nitrate content among cultivars, but ultimately at the final harvest, we didn't see any differences in nitrate content among different cultivars in either production season. But in terms of nitrate accumulation on a per plant basis, you can see that Tall Utah was a higher nitrogen or a nitrate nitrogen accumulating cultivar as compared to Kelvin, Tango, TZ6200, and Victoria. And I know Aaron mentioned the 1200 milligram per kilogram or ppm threshold for nitrate. And a lot of my results are here presented in nitrate nitrogen, so just a scaling factor there. But just for reference, 1200 milligram ppm of nitrate is equivalent to 271 ppm or milligrams per kilogram of nitrate nitrogen. So while we were approaching that 1200 threshold, we were just a little bit short in terms of the highest levels of nitrate attained in our conditions across the two production seasons. So the next set of trials that I want to highlight here, the nitrogen application rate and the fertilizer source studies. So this experiment was also conducted as a fall and spring trial with a mid-season and a final season harvest in the late winter or early spring, in the case of the fall trial, and in the late spring or early summer in the spring trial. And this experiment included three total nitrogen application rate core rates in the fall, ranging from 140 to 308 kilo per hectare of nitrogen. And we also included this pre-plant only control, 78 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. And that's because the pre-plant fertilizer was applied at 35% of each total nitrogen application rate, with the remainder applied through in-season fertigation. So that pre-plant only control basically matches that 35% from the mid nitrogen application rate of 225, which is the current conventional recommendation for the state of Florida and the IFAS recommendations. So in the spring, the experimental design was pretty similar, but we did expand our total nitrogen application rates to range from 0 to 336 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. And we added a liquid fertilizer component, comparing liquid fish fertilizer to Chilean nitrate positive control to gain a better and more complete understanding in terms of in-season as well as pre-plant nitrogen fertilization differences on crop performance and nitrate dynamics. So those two contrasting granular organic fertilizers were Everlizer and NatureSafe. One is a heat processed poultry litter, and the other is a more commercial formulation with feather meal, meat and blood meal, bone meal, sulfate of potash. And you can see that in addition to differences in their guaranteed analysis, we also have differences where Everlizer has a higher organic matter content and a higher pH as compared to NatureSafe. So these compositional differences ultimately led to differences in early season soil nitrate nitrogen fluxes, and this is a dynamic measurement of nitrate movement essentially through the soil at set intervals throughout the production season. And we saw very drastic differences in terms of the nitrate nitrogen fluxes at 14 and 21 days after transplanting, where NatureSafe exhibited much higher early season nitrate nitrogen fluxes as compared to Everlizer, which was a more balanced nitrate flux, potentially speaking to differences in terms of the nitrogen mineralization patterns between these two organic sources of nitrogen. And although the absolute values were different among fall and spring trials, we saw very similar trends in terms of the relationship between these two organic sources of nitrogen in the spring trial, um, which ultimately led to differences in crop yield performance. And you can see that the yields at 308 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare were significantly higher than all of the other nitrogen application rates under Everlyzer, shown in blue. But in NatureSafe, shown in orange, there were no yield improvements beyond that current IFIS recommendation of 224 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare, just highlighting the importance of considering organic sources of nitrogen as part of a nutrient management plan and as part of the impacts potentially leading to not only differences in crop yield performance, but potentially differences in terms of nitrogen dynamics in plant tissue as well. And we saw similar trends and similar findings in the spring trial, but we did see lower crop yields in general in the spring due to the more challenging environmental conditions with the warmer weather, more frequent precipitation that was not so suitable for celery production. You can see here visually the differences at that highest nitrogen application rate, where Everlyzer resulted in more robust growth in terms of above ground and below ground tissue. So in terms of nitrate nitrogen content, there were actually no impacts of the nitrogen application rate or the organic fertilizer source. But in terms of nitrate nitrogen accumulation on a per plant basis, we definitely see that the pre-plant only control accumulated much less nitrate nitrogen as compared to the other core nitrogen application rates. But there were no differences from 140 to 308 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare in terms of the nitrogen application rate and as it affected the nitrate nitrogen accumulation on a per plant basis. And this suggests potentially that differences in biomass accumulation and nitrate uptake may be proportional, and further study on nitrate uptake as well as nitrate reduction in plant tissue may help to provide some more insight in terms of these differences or lack of differences among different nitrogen application rates and organic sources of nitrogen. So the next set of trials is the pre-plant and in-season fertigation and nitrogen regime studies. And these were conducted as two fall trials, and you can see the timeline associated with those here with a November transplanting, which was more appropriate for the organic celery production in the southeast region here in northern Florida. And this experiment used 280 kilograms of nitrogen as a across the board management practice, but we manipulated the ratio or the percentage of pre-plant to in-season fertilization ranging from 0% to 100% pre-plant nitrogen. Again, using those two contrasting granular organic fertilizers as a pre-plant, and then using liquid fish fertilizer as an in-season source of nitrogen. Visually, I just want to highlight the differences within one nitrogen application rate across the board, 280 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. The very stark differences that you'll see in terms of plant growth, yield development, canopy vigor, even the greenness. You can see very distinct differences and very severe nitrogen deficiency at this 100% pre-plant nitrogen application as compared to a more balanced application of 20% Everlyzer by nitrogen and 80% of nitrogen using liquid fish fertilizer. You can see NatureSafe resulted in very similar results where the excessive pre-plant application limited crop yield performance and resulted in some very apparent nitrogen deficiency, while this more balanced application resulted in much improved canopy vigor and overall yield development. So we were able to quantify these differences in yield using regression, where the maximum yields were attained at 26% pre-plant nitrogen under NatureSafe and 34% pre-plant nitrogen under Everlyzer, where at their maximum, NatureSafe and Everlyzer ultimately attained very similar yield performance, ranging between 758 and 784 grams per plant, or between 40 and 42 or so thousand kilograms of fresh celery tissue per hectare. So in terms of nitrate content, again, we saw no differences in tissue nitrate content in the 2022 trial, as shown here in purple. But in orange, you can see that the nitrate nitrogen content at these higher nitrogen application rates from 40 to 100% pre-plant nitrogen was the nitrate content in plant tissue was significantly lower than in the 0% pre-plant nitrogen, which tended to maximize nitrate nitrogen content. The nitrate nitrogen accumulation isn't shown here, but it was lowest at the 100% pre-plant nitrogen application, suggesting that these excessive pre-plant applications can have impacts on nitrate uptake, which makes sense in our very sandy soil conditions here in the Southeast. We saw that declining total nitrogen content and also declining total nitrogen accumulation with this fairly steady, especially in 2022, nitrate nitrogen content suggests that there's an increasing proportion of nitrogen as nitrate. And this may be to nitrate's role as an osmoticum in the vacuole under drought and photosynthetically limited conditions, as well as impacts of the nitrogen management strategies on nitrate assimilation, which is an important area that should be further studied to more completely understand the impacts there. So the last set of studies I want to highlight is the integrated nutrient management studies. And this began with a summer cover crop using sun hemp in the summer of 2022 and 2023, followed by compost application after flail chopping cover crop residues, celery transplanting, and ultimately a mid-season and final harvest again. We use that similar 280 kilogram of nitrogen management practice in terms of a uniform nitrogen management practice using both pre-plant and liquid in-season fertilization. But we compared sun hemp to a weedy fallow control, and we also compared an unamended or no compost control to various compost treatments. And you can see the cover crop plots here, as well as the what they look like after flail chopping, and then 1 week after cover crop termination, when we applied composts, laid plastic mulch, and then ultimately transplanted celery within about a day of this photo. And in terms of yield performance, we see that there were no significant effects of cover cropping or compost in 2022. But this figure from 2023 shows that all composts actually increase the yield performance compared to the unamended control as shown in orange, but only in the sun hemp. In the weedy fallow treatments, we actually see no differences in yield performance in response to different compost applications, which just goes to show the importance of integrated management practices in terms of impacts on crop performance in organic systems, where compost may not necessarily promote yield performance, cover crop residues may not be able to be well utilized in a long season crop like organically grown celery that can exceed 110 days in the field. But in synergy, we are able to mitigate some of that rapid nitrogen mineralization from leguminous cover crop residues with the application of higher carbon to nitrogen ratio containing composts. And this is an effect that we saw only in one production season. So more research and longer term research integrating these practices is necessary to really fully understand. But in terms of nitrate content, cover cropping or compost did not affect nitrate nitrogen content, but in 2022, the mixed compost actually increased nitrate nitrogen accumulation compared to the unamended control. And in 2023, we saw that the sun hemp increased nitrate accumulation compared to the weedy fallow. And we saw that the yields in 2022, if you recall, were similar among treatments, but these differences in nitrate nitrogen accumulation as affected by composts suggest that there may be differences or that compost may actually impact nitrogen metabolism, as well as the higher cover crop biomass in 2023 that ultimately may have promoted this increased nitrate accumulation. So overall, the major takeaways from this project are that we did see cultivar differences, but they were season dependent, although Tall Utah tended to be a high yielding cultivar and a high nitrate accumulator across the board. We saw differences in pre-plant organic fertilizers that in terms of the early season nitrate dynamics in soil that ultimately impacted crop yield performance and nitrogen use efficiency indicators. And we saw that nitrogen application timing was critical in terms of its impact on crop yield performance, as well as nitrogen dynamics in plant tissue. And we saw that there's prospects of integrating nitrogen management using compost and cover crops that may ultimately enhance crop productivity and may impact nitrogen and nitrate nitrogen plant tissue dynamics. So with that, I am going to pass it off to Stephen, and I'm looking forward to some of the discussions after all the speakers. Thank you.
Uh, I'll be briefly talk about the quality aspect and the meat application of the alternative curing powders. So first, I would like to briefly introduce what's the function of the nitrites in the meats. So the nitrites gives the cured meats the color, and most importantly, it inhibits Clostridium botulinus and other pathogens and spoilage bacteria. it inhibits lipid oxidation and give cured meat flavor. Nitrite and nitrate are regulated at 200 and 700 ppm, respectively for whole muscle and community products. Nitrite is 156, and nitrate is regulated at 17, 18 ppm for community products. And the main function of the nitrite is nitrite will bind to the iron content in the heme, and which in the thermal processings, it will convert to the nitrosohemochrome, which gave the cured meat the pinkish colors. And why the nitrite level is regulated, because in high temperature cookings or in very acidic conditions, nitrite might form nitrosamines content in processed meats. And volatilized nitrosamines is considered carcinogenic.
Dr. Sheng, sorry, do you mind just putting this on presenter mode? It makes your slides a little bit
Sure.
bigger to see.
Sure.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that. All right.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between the cure powders? This is just a brief introduction. The standard cures, which we all know as the short cures, contain sodium nitrite at 6.25%, and the rest is salt and a tiny amount of the dye. And the alternative cure, or the vegetable sauce curing, usually contains 50 to 70% of the salt content. That's the results we analyze different suppliers of their alternative curing powders. And other ingredients is the plant sauce ingredients. And the nitrite and nitrate is approximately 5 to 7%. Most of them present in the nitrite forms, which means the bacteria convert the nitrate to nitrite really well in alternative curing powders. And the rest is the plant sauce ingredients, or called other phytochemicals. So most of our research has been published, open access. If you're interested in reading more details about this research, just search the organic curing ingredients on Google Scholar. You will find most of the publications we have done, and they are open access for free for most of you. I will briefly introduce about our meat applications on three different meat systems: deli turkeys, boneless ham, and frankfurters. And I will be presenting the quality. There's many ways to do the quality evaluations. I'll be presenting the quality in objective ways and subjective ways. Objective ways is the color measurements, the cure efficacies, and the related nitrite retentions, or what's their depletion looks like. And also subjectively, we have the consumer sensory panels to evaluate the meat product. So first about we dive deep. I will dive deep into the deli style turkey because turkey is very bland in the flavor. So it's a very good subject to tell if there's any flavor difference. Because of the salt content in the alternative cure ingredients, we use for more information, we use commercially available alternative cure ingredients. CEL stands for the conventional celery. OCEL is the organic celery powders. SW is the Swiss chard, and OSW is organic Swiss chard. So we actually calibrate the salt content as well as the nitrite content to make sure the final products really taste the same. We follow the industry standard ways to produce those products, including grinding, mixing, and tumbling, and even vacuum tumble and leave them in the tumbler overnight for better cure, and stuff and thermal process to reach internal temperature to 165, which is a little bit higher than industry standards to make sure we can serve the panelists the safest products as we can. And the first is the we call it the proximate content: moisture, protein, fat, and salt content. We basically see no difference at all among all treatment, which is expected. And the second part is the cure efficacies. So what's the cure efficacies? Cure efficacy is calculated based on a cured meat pigments divided by the total meat pigments. Like the introductions I've been talking about a little bit, nitrite binds to the heme, and which converted to nitrosohemochrome eventually. but some of the meat pigments is not being binded by nitrite, which is not being cured. We see the sodium nitrite treatment has the highest cured meat pigments or the conversion rate, which means more nitrites being available in the sodium nitrite forms to bind into the meat proteins for the color development. And the residual nitrite content in the sodium nitrite treatment is significantly higher than the rest of treatments at day 0 when the product just manufactured. And over the storage, we didn't see an obvious difference among all treatments. And the third part is the light display studies. We basically mimicked how the products will be displayed on store shelf. Basically, they are in a vacuum. They're in a plastic covered, which is oxygen permeable and moisture permeables. And sorry about the noise. It's just a train pass by. So when they're exposed to the light, the nitrous hemochrome is very light sensitive, so it will be dissipate. The color will become a little bit more pale. So when we see the figures on the right side, you can see at 24 hours, the light exposed compared with the non-exposed, the light of both sides is way more pale than the non-exposed side. So what's the difference when we compare the two different treatments in terms of other color parameters? So we use different parameters to measure, including the redness, greenness, yellowness, also the saturation of the color. The saturation of the color is measured by both the A value and the B values. So we see the sodium nitrite treatment has much lower B values, which is potentially or very likely due to the carotenoids and plant pigments factors contributed by the alternative cure ingredients, which is for sure not present in the chemical synthesized ingredients. This can be further verified by the chroma C and the CIEB values. So, and the alternative cure doesn't matter, regardless it's conventional or organic cured, it has no color difference. And the consumer sensory panel, which we invited approximately 200 to 250 people to come to taste the samples, to test if there's any difference between the organic cured compared with the non-organic cured celery and Swiss chard, as well as the synthetic sodium nitrite. Basically, there's the consumers can tell there's a difference between the organic Swiss chard and the rest of treatments. And organic Swiss chard has a significantly more non-meat aftertaste and earthiness, slightly higher bitterness scores, but the overall liking and purchase intent, there's no difference in the synthetic compared with the traditional or organic, regardless it's celery or Swiss chard. So we further dive into these problems using two other different meat systems, the Frankfurter and the boneless ham. They are formulated accordingly to industry standard. As you see here is the boneless ham productions and formulations. And on the picture on the top right, it's what the marinations looks like when we inject it into the tumbler and the vacuum tumbler exams. The sodium nitrite, which is the synthetic, is on your most left. It's almost a transparent liquid, which is for sure it's not involve any plant chemicals, and the rest is the organic and the conventional curing powders treatment. And the same as Frankfurters, we grind the meats using kidney plates to make a large chunk of the meat using a bowl chopper, just like what industry will do, and apply at the same time apply the different curing ingredients, the sodium nitrite, the conventional and organic curing powders. So what's their quality difference? So the residual nitrite content on the left side is the boneless Frankfurters, and on the right side is the boneless ham. The residual nitrite, similar findings in the compared with the Turkey studies, the residual nitrite in the sodium nitrite treatment is higher at day zeros, and the difference become less and less and not significant until day 45. The day 60 data is not shown here, but it's really little difference at day 60 as well. The cured meat colors. In the frankfurters, the cured meat colors in the sodium nitrite treatment is significantly higher compared with the rest of the treatments. It's potentially that's more heme content, and in the beef compared with the pork, so that's where the reason in the boneless ham, the results for the cured meat pigments is very various, and we can't really see a big difference between the treatments. And when we talk about saturations, the same story applies here. The plant pigments contribute to the B values, while the sodium nitrite treatments don't have any plant pigments such as carotenoids or those pigments contribute to the B value. So the saturations for the alternative cure products supposed to be much better than the sodium nitrite treatments. But there's no difference regarding to the conventional and the organic products. So here we present is the consumer sensory panels. Consumers and it's actually the end customers of all those products, and they are actually the most accurate or sensitive equipments we can assess, used to assess those products. And what consumers tell us for the boneless ham treatment, we found the non-meat aftertaste, the organic Swiss chard has significantly higher non-meat aftertaste than the rest of treatments. And the over-likings and the purchase intent show no difference. When we look at the frankfurters, it's the same stories. The organic Swiss chard has the significant higher non-meat aftertaste, and the synthetic sodium nitrite has least aromas. When it comes to the over-liking and the purchase intent, there's no difference. We further conducted some age group and consumption frequency studies, which hasn't been published, and we are working in progress. We have found there is a big difference between the consumer groups and the consumption frequencies. For example, for the consumers, the least and the most frequent consumers, they don't tell the difference between the overall liking or purchase intent. But for the middle consumers, for example, they consume once per 2 weeks or once per 3 weeks. They easily tell the difference for the non-meat aftertaste and aroma difference between the alternative cure, either the organic, compare with the sodium nitrite treatment. So a little bit takeaway and implications. Although the instrumental analysis, as we show in those 3 different meat systems, apparently shows there's a difference between the organic, conventional, and the sodium nitrite. It doesn't matter consumers' perceptions or choice when it comes to the product. And the sensory attributes we have studied, specifically using the consumer sensory panels, indicated organic Swiss chard exhibit the higher non-meat aftertaste compared with other treatments, including the sodium nitrite and other alternative cure ingredients. We have conducted a volatile compounds analysis as well to tell what's the compounds making the difference. And briefly, I can explain is the organic Swiss chard has higher volatilized plant chemicals compared with the conventional Swiss chard. But why organic celery powder is not exhibit as significantly higher volatile compounds compared with the conventional is we found that the commercially available organic celery powders we tested, it goes through the deodorization process, which don't have any plant volatile compounds anymore. That potentially answer the questions why organic celery is not making a difference. That's the overall what I want to present for this meat applications, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you so much. Great. And if you stop sharing your screen, we can come to our discussion here. That was a lot of detail and right in the weeds, and I found that really fascinating, especially the food science stuff. I haven't seen too much presented on, how the things from the field translate into that final product. So thank you so much to everyone who just presented. I know that we have a couple folks who need to leave. Um, Stephen and Sheen have to leave, so thank you so much for joining us today. Um, and then I think we'll just go ahead and get the discussion started. I really love this study design. I like that you did some field work in multiple regions in the US, which is important to understand for the differences in production challenges and opportunities. I also love that you went all the way through to understand how the different production strategies influence the final product after it's been processed, and even further to understand consumers' perceptions of those. I'm wondering, you have to remind me if it was within the scope or outside the scope of this work to do any sort of economic analysis from the field all the way through that production phase. Erin
So
or others want to hop in?
yeah, and so what we did have an economist, Paul Mitchell, on the team, and within the final report, we'll present, given the optimization that we saw in the field studies, what the cost of production is given factors such as land cost, organic input cost, yields. Like I mentioned, to go to final product, some of the research that we really should be still conducting is some of that translational research, which is what we kind of skipped over. We went from field to we have the product to the meat processing side of things and quality, consumer perception. What we didn't capture that was beyond the scope of the project is some of that processing with respect to getting the nitrate from the plant to the nitrite that is actually used. And there's various ways that can be done depending on what that product is. One of the questions that did arise, for instance, within the scope of the project or within the work of the project was we were finding some interesting differences in some of the pilot runs with how the organic product seems to be lower with respect to conversion efficiency. Again, there's also some issues, I think, with it's a small industry in terms of the folks that are producing these cured products. There's a lot of proprietary information that was wonderful to work with the partners, but not necessarily something that we were at liberty to share some of that proprietary information in terms of the processing. So one of the things that we couldn't capture necessarily was what was the cost of the organic cured product. Again, there's certainly some of that on the market now, but how do we translate that into a US-based system? It was difficult given the scope of the industry. We don't like to report like the individual. We typically have to have a sample size that's large, and we can anonymize some of those numbers. So that was a little bit more difficult to capture, but we know we can help produce projections in terms of how much does it cost to produce this organic celery or Swiss chard in the case of the alternative curing powder.
Yeah, amazing. So I have lots of questions, but I want to actually give other folks on this call a chance to share, not necessarily even questions, but just like your reactions. How does what you saw today or what you might have already known about the project, how does this fit into your worlds? And for anybody who wants to share anything, feel free to turn on your camera or leave it off, whatever makes you feel comfortable. But if you want to raise your hand first, just so I can call on folks in the right order, that would be helpful. So just wondering from the industry perspective, any immediate thoughts or reactions to some of these results? And if not, I also have some probing questions too, but just giving you some space here first. Okay, Aaron, do you have any? Oh, I see. Maybe Mike, are you thinking of saying something? I see you coming on and off of mute there.
Yeah, I can't find the hand raising thing. I
Oh, weird.
apologize for that. I just want to thank the researchers for the research. It's really fascinating to see some of these things on paper. I had one generalized comment, right, for the group here too, and I had one specific question for the researchers. Um, we've Organic Valley Crop Cooperative has been in the organic meat business for a very long time, and we've always participated with the OTA on public comments related to celery powder, and of course working with the Aaron for sure over there at the UW-Madison. Recently, a business decision was made for Crop Cooperative to get out of the organic meat business. So there's going to be a transition of us out. It's not necessarily related to celery powder. The decision by leadership was to focus on other items in our portfolio. So as far as us being heavily involved with the future of celery powder, probably not so much going forward. And I just wanted to let the group know that in early 26, we'll really be fully exited out of the organic meat business. The second question I want to ask, because I'm a organic certifier guy, right? And this is for the production fields, research fields in Florida and also in Wisconsin. There's also quite often there's yield drags when you transition from conventional production into an organic system, and was just wondering if there was any differences in the length of the time either the Florida fields or the Wisconsin fields were under organic management.
Yeah, our fields that the research was conducted on, they've been certified organic for, gosh, about 20 years. So they've been in fairly long-term organic management. And I would say managed well. We get certified by MOSA. And we do be sure to use crop rotation, really intensive cover crop methods. We are on more loamy type soils. But I think I'm proud of the organic management we do, and it was longer term organic fields.
Yeah, Florida's fields, I'm a grad student there. I don't know exactly how long. I think it's been at least in the realm of maybe 15 years under organic management. But from what I've seen, just in terms of the rotational pattern and other trials that are kind of coming in and out of there on a research station, it's challenging to really emulate the effect of like a true organic farm with optimized, carbon additions, especially in our sandy soil conditions, like composting, cover cropping is really an important part of an organic nutrient management plan and an organic systems plan. And I think that, quite honestly, is a little bit lacking in those research fields because we try to kind of come off with a blank slate for researchers that are coming in, and adding these carbon sources and adding cover crop residues can kind of compound some of the findings that researchers will see there. So I would say ours is probably more in line with like a transitioning field, even though it's been under organic management for such a long time. And that may speak to some of the differences that we've seen in the two trials there too, in addition to soil differences and environmental differences, the long-term management differences may have kind of impacted our ability to really most effectively utilize nitrogen application, potentially lower nitrogen use efficiency, the lower nitrate accumulation and nitrate content that we saw in Florida may be attributed to that too.
Yeah, thank you.
That was an excellent question, Mike, and something that I actually throw out all the time as a challenge working with organic research is that a lot of times when papers are published about studies done in organic, these levels of details are not offered. And sometimes it's not even known. Researchers might even not know like how long land has been certified organic or managed organically. Um, and that could very much influence the results that we see. Um, depending especially on the variables that we're measuring. So it's a great question. Aaron, I'm actually wondering, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you have any burning questions for those who joined us today, um, I know that you are really interested in making sure that we're trying to fill knowledge gaps or needs by the industry. And just, with your experience in this work, are there any burning questions that you have from some of the folks here in industry?
Yeah, we're always again looking to as researchers at land grant universities, committed to help solving practical questions of the industry. And we did have a reconvening of the group, gosh, like a year or so ago, and some of the thoughts that were brought up then is again some questions related to the processing. Are there differences related to the processing of the raw product into a usable form, whether it be a juice or a powder? Some more R&D there that maybe we could have some partnerships on. Some more questions on refining of uh, the timing of harvest. Again, I see some of the issues where I was asked to give some comments, even though obviously from a food quality perspective, it looks like the organic product can produce a high quality product. And in some cases, consumers seem to prefer it. I'm hesitant to say that organic sources need to be required, organic powders need to be required, again, simply because of some of the supply chain risks. And I would hate to see that drive organic meat processors out of business. And I wonder if there might be some compromises, I guess. I see this to some extent with similar to the organic seed issue, where there are some options available, but is there a way that the industry could be incentivized, I guess, to procure the organic powder? And then if there were issues in terms of supply, that there may be some ways that we can still create a safety net, especially as the industry continues to grow. So I'm always curious to hear where there's further questions in terms of industry, or where there might be ways to, I guess, still move forward to incentivize the growth. I mean, to have organic ingredients, I think, is so critical to just the overall support of the organic industry. Organic farmers need diversification. The ingredients allow for opportunities for farmers to diversify their rotation and expand markets for those diversified products. So if we're going to support broadly organic farmers that are producing a variety of commodities and ingredients, to make sure that every part of the organic food that we're producing is coming from organic farms, really helps support everything within the organic rotation. So I see the movement to organic ingredients procured from organic sources as being critical to the support of organic farmers more broadly. But I think we need to work together to do that. And we're happy to continue to explore where we can help with answering those questions.
Yeah, I know we've spoken in the past about some of these supply chain challenges, and needing to better understand what kind of infrastructure is important, in order to move away just from creating it in the field, right, to throughout the whole process. And so, um, right now, I'm curious, like how much organic celery powder is there, and how much are you using? How much access do you have? Um, could it be better? Just getting a better understanding. Yeah, where are you all at right now?
And that's another thing that we didn't necessarily dive into. So we didn't dive into, there's like different pieces we didn't dive into. We didn't dive into the taking the celery and then making that into the usable source for the meat processors. I mean, we also, as part of that, there's other questions in terms of the cost of and how that relates to harvest timing. I mean, if we have a conventional plant, that's going to need to be converted to an organic line, and there likely is not enough volume nor justification to create an organic plant. So how does that relate to the cost and feasibility of having a conventional line be able to be certified organic from the processing standpoint?
Yeah, and I saw you nodding a bit there.
see there. Am I? Can you hear me? Yeah. So I work for Carry Foods at Carry Tasty Nutrition and a portfolio manager for our celery powder products. And I would say right now we don't have a huge interest in organic. That could change obviously as if we're saying that organic is more available and that can be called out. What is interesting to me, and I think what we're seeing is the variety of products. So if it was the research on this was chard, where shorter growing season, more diverse for the farmer. I think with us, we have to do about a year in advance with our suppliers on celery because they need to plan ahead. So if there's something more available or that we can use that, not only helps the farmers rotate their plants, but it gives us, more time or less or shorter amount of time to say we need more. And that would be a great benefit for us. So if it helps farmers, helps us, that sounds like that's a good step forward.
Yeah, thanks. Any other thoughts from others at this point? Michael?
Hey, yeah, I'm a product developer at Whole Foods and work specifically with meat products for our private label. And we, probably in the last year, have been transitioning all of our conventional celery powders and our organic meats to organic celery powders. Um, so the research that y'all presented on has been really interesting. And we've seen it, from our manufacturers and suppliers that uh, this is kind of a press from them because there's now an organic alternative to the conventional that it's kind of more of a requirement by our organic certifiers and from our own standards to make sure that uh, any ingredient that is available as organic that we use it. So seeing this research is great and fortifying, like just our take on organics and seeing some of the research on the consumer studies and some of the organoleptics, like from a visual standpoint, on how it performs. We're seeing the same things in products that we've transitioned over.
Yeah, I want to put you on the spot and feel free to refrain from answering, but I'm wondering, I want to talk a little bit more about the supply chain and where you might source the organic celery powder. And I ask because I know the previous conversations that we've had in this group is that there isn't currently a lot that exists or that is available for various reasons domestically. And so people have looked outside of the borders. And we've
Yeah.
been discussing internally how potentially like these tariff situations might change the landscape. So I'd love to hear any thoughts that you or others might have on that too.
Um, yeah, I can't really divulge the suppliers of the celery powders because it's proprietary to some of our uh, manufacturers, but the tariff situation is a challenge for all ingredients that are not produced in the US right now. It's something that we're constantly working on managing and getting ahead of, even though it's a constantly changing situation.
Yeah,
So it's definitely a challenge.
yeah. And maybe Mike, I know you mentioned that you all are moving away from organic meats, but in the past, have you been able to like easily access the celery powder? I know you said we're not getting out of meats because of celery powder, but I don't know if that was like a challenge for you all.
Um, yeah, and I know Scott at the OTA and us have had conversations, on this specifically. One challenge that we had, and this is last 3 or 4 years, right? As we've learned that organic celery powder is available on the marketplace. We've had I don't take this the wrong way, but maybe a easy way to say it is that we've had bigger fish to fry, right? We've seen a huge transition between co-processors for us, and that was such a heavy lift during that co-processor switch to keep products on the market. We didn't want that additional learning curve at the new crop co-processors to start working with an organic celery powder. And then we've had the business transition to make the decision to get out of the organic meat business, right? And so the priority has just really dropped off the radar since then.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I mean, we've also discussed that too, thinking about moving forward with this work, where, like, whose court should the ball fall into at this point? Is it more public research that needs to go into this? Is it more private development? Is there even that much interest at this point? Um, Hi.
Just want to add some comments to this. My name is Shaw Sotries. I'm in product development at Applegate. I work on most of the Cure product lines. Been following the story for 10, 12, 13 years now. And we saw the transition in the conversation around efficacy, I guess, a few years ago, and to knowing that there is something that is going to work. It's going to work as well as conventional. And I think that's especially what we saw today, supports that statement. Supply chain is really what it's all about. It's really all about supply chain. I talked to a number of folks on this call at many different times, and I think it would be beneficial to have that business plan around supply chain really for us to make any decisions moving forward. To this point, the numbers and figures haven't been able to have securities, especially with kind of the agronomy side of things. What if all the what ifs that could happen? What if Florida gets a hurricane and the crop gets wiped out? Where is the backup region? Well, all of our other ingredients, we have multiple countries and regionalities that have backups of backups. Organic celery is in that situation at the moment.
And that was really drove my comments to the NOSB of why I was advocating for it not to be restricted. I think that it's a supply chain issue, and there's right now it's risky given the limited sources and production areas and just the global economic political climate. I think it's just would be really easy for something to happen with the supply chain that would really put the organic meat processing industry at risk. Not so much. I mean, I think we can do it. We're showing we can do it, but I mean, do we want to have the organic meat processors take on that risk given just the limited number of suppliers and the supply chain issues that we see?
Internally, we've worked around potential strategies on what we could potentially do if there's like a step process and introduction and dip our toes in the water. But at this point, even at that point, the supply chain is not there for our own securities.
Yeah, as a former NOSB member and as someone who has a background in sourcing, I feel those pains. It's and we're still stuck. This research is really good at getting us over that hurdle of can it be done? But now you're still stuck with all the supply chain realities. And there's a lot that even weren't highlighted. For example, packaging risks if you go organic and your supply chain runs out. The fact that I don't know what percentage OV was of the overall demand, but them exiting the market because it doesn't make it. This is still a very niche market at the end of the day, and that has a lot of supply chain dynamics, and all these factors still need to get worked out over time before I think we would consider supporting a sizable change in this space.
Yeah, and so we just have a few minutes left here, and I guess this would be a good time maybe to gather like the wish list, like based on your situation and experience, where would you like to see the next steps of this work going? And I hear a lot about supply chain, but if there are specifics or anything that you would want to call out, have it be on record for us, it would be great to hear from you on that.
what I would say is, frankly, data is one piece around supply that would probably enable most people knowing availability, knowing demand in processed meat products. That would give businesses that make the celery powder better insights into the opportunity space to invest in that or not. And that data would then help, lead changes or inform that, frankly, the status quo is where we're at for the time being until the processed meat market grows.
Yeah. And do you mean for clarification, knowing the availability of
Demand signals and like
our
processed
sources
meats.
of, yeah, the
Yeah.
processed ingredient? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Any other wishes or thoughts at this point?
I wish this was closer to the next sunset period.
Yeah.
Took the words out of my mouth. That was the last
So
thing I was going to
somehow,
say.
this group of 16 need to remember this 4 years from now and ensure that this recording gets entered into the record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And either, come to a public comment webinar or submit a comment and just reiterating the challenges.
Maybe it's worth having another convening closer to the date, right? Just sending out at that point, seeing anybody who's still where they're at now, and we still have contacts for you all, and just reconvene and see where, how has everything progressed for you? How is
I
this?
think it could be, I think it could be helpful to have the scientists who have commented had these findings for any progress updates.
So also in regards to that, I wanted to, before I forget, let you all know that so we will send you the recording of this. We will have notes that we'll send out for this. Feel free to share them with whoever you think might find it useful. We also are in the process of developing a final report for these research results. And so you'll have a nice little synthesis at that point. But yeah, Aaron, I don't know if you have other stuff still in the pipeline, or if you're kind of at like an end point for this work.
We're from the USDA funding perspective, we're at an endpoint. If there's areas where this group sees for further collaborations or partnerships, we're happy to talk about where there might be further partnerships to move specific questions forward. But unless there's more interest, if funding does open up again to develop a phase 2 of the project, we're taking a pause right now, but very open to further conversations if there are more. And we do have the ability to again make specific agreements to address specific research questions if that's of interest.
Great. And if any of you all have other questions or thoughts that come to you later, feel free to reach out to me or anybody else that will be on this chain. I think even through this event, you'll have access to all of our emails. So, but yeah, I want to thank you again for showing up, being here with us today, sharing your thoughts, listening to the results, and thanks again to all of our presenters for sharing all this really insightful work.
And as a researcher, thank OTA and the Organic Center for your amazing work and facilitating this, because we couldn't do it without OTA bringing all these different partners together and the Organic Center making sure that the word gets out to you all. So I want to, and our industry partners, gratitude as a team, truly.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? All right. All of you have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.